Welcome back to the SportsMax Zone. We kick things off with football. Jamaica will not have its English-based players available for its away World Cup qualifying matches starting this week. The Jamaica Football Federation, the JFF, says because of the United Kingdom's red list restrictions, which require players returning from these countries to have a mandatory 10 days of hotel quarantine on return to England, they have adopted a strategy to avoid the lengthy quarantine periods. In a press release, this is what the JFF said, the release issued on Monday. With 3 matches in the first window of the World Cup qualifying campaign and the uncertainties surrounding players based in England, the Jamaica Football Federation has entered its vast player pool to compose the current squad of players. Some of the players will be utilized in the 2 away games versus Mexico and Costa Rica, while some will only be activated for the home game against Panama. There are others who will play critical roles in all 3 encounters. The JFF is satisfied that the best available players have been called up despite the extraordinary challenges, and the JFF is fully confident that both players and staff will give an excellent representation for the Qatar motivated campaign. The full Jamaica squad reads, let's have a look at those now. Coming up, as we said, there are some players that will be available for some of the matches and others won't be available for other matches. The players highlighted in black, the England-based players, will only be available to face Panama at the National Stadium, after which the majority of them will return to England on the 26th of August. The JFF, on their official Twitter page, pinned the following: "We need our voice to rise up in unison. We need you to call on the British government to relax the quarantine measures so we can have our best team on the field. We need every single player. Give us our boys. Let's go Jamaica. No quarantine. Qatar we say." At UK Gov News. Now, in the photo accompanying the tweet, the caption reads, "Give us our boys. Hashtag make an exemption." So the JFF gets part of their request with some absentees for key games. How strong is their squad for the qualifiers? To answer those questions and more, former TNT international Brent Sancho. So Brent, we had discussed this previously when the story arose about, the English League clubs not releasing their players beyond a certain point and to certain countries. What's your take on what the JFF has done here and the fact that they've had to sift through their player pool and channel some players to some of the matches and others can't play?
Yeah, it's a difficult situation for the JFF, and I thought they've done well in terms of the team they've selected, but they shouldn't be here, Lance. This should not be the decision that they have to make. I am extremely disappointed, first of all, with the UK government and the way they've approached things, particularly with the fact that during the Euros, they had the opportunity to bring in different delegates and players and basically have it their own way for the European Championship a couple months ago. And I'm a little bit disappointed in FIFA. I think they should have taken a lot stronger stance against the clubs as it relates to releasing players. Because as I said before, I think they've been very, very selfish in their approach, and that's the clubs and sitting back behind the British government. They all know the importance of World Cup qualifiers, and they all know the importance of World Cup football for most of these countries that are vying for a place in Qatar.
Yeah. Does it hurt a little more too, Brent? Because just in the past 24 hours, we saw where La Liga failed to hold on to their players and based on a CAS ruling, were forced to give their players up for South American qualifiers.
Yeah, I think that puts an extra sting in it. And the teams that are being really impacted by it is the CONMEBOL teams, of course, in South America and the teams in CONCACAF. I am very sure, Lance, if this was the other way around and the English teams, Italian teams, Scottish teams, etc., were impacted by this, you would have had an uproar. It would probably be in the front pages of every single newspaper. And it's extremely unfortunate what is happening. Again, of course, the president, Infantino, would have sent out a message. But I thought something a bit stronger would have come from FIFA as it relates to the clubs still holding on to their players. There's no way that this can be right. At the end of the day, football has an ecosystem that has been respected for decades as it relates to club versus country. In fact, that that coining of a word, club versus country, doesn't exist anymore because they all have found a way to live in this ecosystem. And this is extremely unfortunate what is taking place right now.
Yes, Brent, and the first thing, people would have expected is that the JFF would have gotten more support in this fight. And I have to say it's a fight because it's basically you challenging another body in order to get the players. Do you feel as if they got the support that you expected from?
Well, the support they got, I think it would have had to come from FIFA. I think they've done their best in terms of course, calling a very strong squad on paper. However, when you look at what has happened, particularly in CONMEBOL, where, for example, in Argentina, where the players basically boarded the plane and left, Argentina FA made it very clear that they want their players. Brazil, very similar. I think there is going to be a bit of a spot there, particularly with the group that leaves from Liverpool. But some of these FAs have a lot stronger legs to stand on, and so they're doing just that. It's unfortunate, as I said, for the JFF. I'm very sure that they've tried everything in their power to get their players. But the UK government has been very, very quiet, Mariah, in this situation. Ever since Infantino wrote that letter, I believe it was last week, Friday or so, there's been no response from them as it relates to that matter. And so both parties, being the UK government and FIFA, are just watching the clubs in the country fight over it and have not said anything or get in the middle of it.
Yeah, and Brent, I want to give the Premier League clubs the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to look at it from their side. Of course, they have invested a lot of money in these players, and it's early in the Premier League season, but some of these teams, let's just say Aston Villa, for example, they depend on particular players, and they're looking at it as if they send these players to represent their international teams, the player comes back with an injury, that bill is on them, and of course they are affected, their results are affected. Do they have a case?
From what I said, I don't think so. As I said, football has a very strong ecosystem and there's a very good understanding as it relates to club and country and players play international football. At the end of the day, a player that plays for Fulham or lower league team lower league in the sense of lower in the division, if their player goes into a World Cup and has a very good tournament, his value goes up. And guess who is the recipient of that value, that rising stock? It's the club. So at the end of the day, a lot of players have found their transfer value through international tournaments. And again, as I said, it's all part of the ecosystem. So there is an understanding there. So for the clubs to sit back and look at this from their perspective alone, and I think that's the key fact, they're looking at it from their perspective alone. Again, I think it's very, very selfish because at the end of the day, a player could get injured in training this week and all sorts can happen. I think fair has to be fair, and let's give the countries every opportunity to qualify for Qatar. And I think they're shortchanging a lot of the various FAs by coming on this ridiculous stance and not letting go the players.
Yeah, and Brent, to deal specifically now with the job at hand for the Reggae Boys, not usual that there are 3 matches in a window. Usually in the past there are 2 matches in a FIFA window for the World Cup qualifying, 3 matches here. And to be quite honest, of the 3 matches, the Panama game, based on rankings, would be the easiest of the 3 for the Reggae Boys. And that is the one that they have all their players for. The Costa Rica and Mexico, which are expected to be the tougher assignments, those are the ones that, the Ravel Morrises of this world can't play in.
Yeah, and look, I think when I saw the Jamaica team on paper, I've argued that it's probably the strongest Caribbean selected team going into any tournament on paper. I may even give it an edge over the 06 Warriors from Trinidad and Tobago. And that's a team on paper, Lance, in terms of the names and clubs that these players have come for. When you look at the structure of the tournament, of course, it's changed from what it was with 6 teams, and now it's 8 teams. It was 10 games before, now it's 14 games. And 15 points could have almost guaranteed you a spot in the World Cup. So Jamaica going into this situation with 3 games to play, 9 points to play for, they would be looking to come out with 7 points. That would be extremely good. But if they came out with 4 points from these 3 games, it's still okay situation. The Panama game is critical, it's crucial. 3 points is a must. And if they get a draw from either the Costa Rica or the Mexico game or both, I think they'll be extremely happy moving into the second phase of fixtures to come in October.
Yeah. And Brent, what's your take on the approach that the JFF and Coach Whitmore would have taken here in assembling a squad? Because there has always been this underlying narrative that there's too much reliance on these England-based players. A lot of them only now being qualified to play for Jamaica. And in this current situation, that narrative now gains ground because people are saying if there was more emphasis on local-based players and strengthening the fabric of the Jamaican team based here, this problem that we are now facing would not be as critical as it is. But, you know, the other side of the coin is that, you know, Whitmore and JFF authorities tend to feel that the local players aren't good enough. What are your thoughts there?
Look, I think qualifying for a World Cup is probably the most important, if not the most important thing for any FA or any member association in FIFA. What it does, it brings, of course, finances to a country. It brings and attract attention to local-based players and to young players that are growing up that could give them the inspiration to want to play the sport, to take the sport more seriously. So I think if the JFF has a way of qualifying to the World Cup using players, of course, with Jamaican percentage, I have no problem with it. I think, however, moving forward, they should use that, of course, to ignite the development process within Jamaica itself in the country. And hopefully, with World Cup cycles to come, you would now start phasing out the English-based players that you're calling, and you would have more developed players on the island. But you have to start somewhere. And I think both Trinidad and Jamaica, Jamaica qualifying in 98 and Trinidad in 06, I think they did not do enough with those qualifications to the World Cup. I think if they are to qualify now, Jamaica that is, what they should do is use that as a catalyst, a platform to start to really push the game locally in Jamaica and really push for development. And as you rightfully say, Lance, hopefully these types of discussions, maybe 5 years down the road, would be something of the past. And now we are talking about players from Cavalier, Arnett Gardens, etc., would be representing Jamaica in World Cup qualifiers.
Yeah, because to be quite honest, going back to your qualification, Brent, in 2006 with Trinidad and Tobago, I remember Chris Birchall, who was, you know, brought in as a non-TNT born, but because of TNT parentage and so on, England-based. But for the most part, a high percentage of the Trinidad and Tobago team that went to the 2006 World Cup were products of TNT, learned to play football in TNT, and were straight TNT players.
Yeah, and of course, you have to kind of put a caveat in that as well, Lance, because at least 14 or so of the players actually applied their trade in the UK or outside of Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, we started in Trinidad.
Well, that's the point I'm making, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that, Brent, because a lot of the players who now play for Jamaica come to Jamaica to play an international for Jamaica, and in some cases, it's their first time they're ever coming to the island.
Look, I think it's a valid point, Lance, but at the end of the day, I think qualifying for the World Cup supersedes any argument that we would have on the topic, simply because what qualification brings, as I said, or supposed to bring, let me add that, supposed to bring to a country. As I mentioned, you really need something to inspire the youth, inspire the young footballers, the next generation of Jamaican footballers. And qualifying for a World Cup does that, and qualifying for a World Cup would help in building that. The only argument I can see that may scuttle that is that both Trinidad and Jamaica has done it before, and it certainly didn't help our development process. But I am always forever an optimistic person, and I hope both countries would have learned from the mistakes that they would have had in the past. And if they are to qualify, Jamaica that is, to the World Cup, that they would certainly use this opportunity to develop the talent on the island, so that this conversation that we're having, guys, would be something of the past, because you guys are correct. We should be looking to, of course, develop the players that we have within our countries, but we have to start somewhere. We missed the boat the last time, but I'm hoping this time around that they use this opportunity, because, guys, I do feel Jamaica has a legitimate chance to qualify for the World Cup. In fact, I would be very surprised if they don't. So I hope that they use this opportunity to develop players on the island.
Yeah, Brent, you couldn't have said it better, because the fact is that since Jamaica's qualification for France in 1998, Jamaica's football has gone backwards. Since TNT's qualification for 2006 in Germany, TNT's football has also regressed. So you couldn't have said it better. So Jamaica getting ready for the start of World Cup qualifiers for Qatar 2022. And there's a look at their opening games in the series. Mexico on Thursday. Then they face Panama on the 5th. Yeah. And that will be a home game. And they travel to Costa Rica to play that country on the 8th of September. So just one home game in the first 3 for the Reggae Boys. And that Panama game at home is the only game that all of the English players who would travel to Kingston will be able to play in. They can't play in the Mexico and Costa Rica games because those countries are red listed by the UK government. We go to break. We'll be back with more on the SportsMax Zone after this.